So before we get into those, I'm wondering your story and what brought you to this work in the first place, why you chose the holistic route.
Yeah, there's a couple different factors that definitely played a role in me moving on this road. And probably the one that's most significant in my life was my upbringing. You know, my mom got cancer when I was in the 6th grade, and my dad got cancer when I was in the 8th grade.
Wow.
And yeah, it really sucked. And both of them, I watched, you know, two people I love the absolute most in life just struggle with this horrible disease. I watched them get eaten alive by this thing. And I lost my dad when I was in high school, and my mom a year later, my freshman year in college. And that really, you know, seeing them go through what they went through and understanding, you know, from what like the World Health Organization says, that about 70% of all cancers, or most cancers, are directly related to diet and lifestyle. I decided I needed to do something that directly impacted people's diet and lifestyle, because I mean, how many people could that help just prevent disease?
Yeah.
So that's a huge reason why I do what I do today, for sure.
That's amazing.
Thanks.
Wow. I feel like we haven't seen a lot of that piece of your story out there online. So thank you for sharing that with us. And that's
You're welcome.
yeah, that's a really great place, I guess, to start, that inspiration to bring you into this type of work. It makes a lot of sense. And it's so interesting how we all have backgrounds that seem to direct us, you know, no matter what, into the work we end up feeling like is our calling.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah, I definitely felt called into what I'm doing right now. That's for sure. Yeah. And it's something I don't talk a whole lot about online. I don't know. I just decided to talk about it. So here we are.
Yeah.
It's kind of how this podcast came along as well for us.
Oh, really?
Well, we just wanting to be a light through, you know, going through our own dark times and wanting to make people feel less alone in their dark times. So kind of feeling called through what we've been through and wanting to kind of, you know, bring people encouragement in the midst of that. So kind of the same.
Yeah, no, I get it. It's beautiful. Yeah, it's purpose driven for sure.
Yeah.
It's great.
So we wanted to discuss with you, out of all the topics that you cover, one of the first ones we wanted to discuss was adrenal fatigue. Can you explain what it is, what causes it, and the effects it has on the body?
Sure. Yeah. So basically adrenal fatigue. So the adrenal glands, right? They're these two little triangular shaped glands that sit directly above your kidneys. And they help us have energy. They help regulate our emotions, our wake sleep cycle. They do all this type of stuff. And the term adrenal fatigue simply just means the glands are fatigued. You know, they're no longer able to do the job that they need to as far as hormone production and neurotransmitter production, because they're fatigued. And they generally get fatigued because they've been asked to do too much for too long. Is generally how it comes about. You know, almost like, I don't know, like if someone was a runner, right? And they just ran, but they just never stopped running. There comes a point in time, if you've ever seen people like do triathlons, you know, some of them, they get to the end of the triathlon, they could barely cross the line. Their legs look like a newborn baby deer. You know, they could barely walk. So the body's just not able to do that. Unless you're Forrest Gump, you can't run that long. So the adrenals are the same. It's like they can't output their hormone for too long. And it's the different stresses in life and actually more appropriately, the internal stresses in the body that cause these glands to be overworked and then fatigued. Essentially is what happens. Yeah, the factors that we typically see behind it is the adrenal glands are, one of their main roles is they're the anti-inflammatory glands in the body. So one of their jobs is to stop inflammation. So when there's something inside your body producing inflammation, like it could be a bacteria, a parasite, a yeast, a fungi, something like that's a toxicity that's producing inflammation, the adrenals have to work overtime to try to deal with that inflammatory reaction. And if that inflammatory cause, whatever it is not handled and properly dealt with, then the adrenals have to work constantly to deal with that inflammation. And the hormone they use for that is cortisol. They can only do that for so long. So if the stressor is never handled, then the adrenals, eventually they're just like, guys, we can only keep up the cortisol production for so long. You know, you're killing us here. And then they fatigue. So that's where the term came about. And that's typically how it usually develops.
What would be some of the symptoms, like for someone that's listening? How would they know that they have adrenal fatigue? What would they be feeling?
Would they look like Jade and I today? Because
does it cause frizzy hair?
Yeah, we are wore out.
You guys look great, man. So one of the big things that we see with adrenal fatigue is that the person's tolerance for stress goes down, because the adrenals help us fight for the stress. So they're like your fuse becomes shorter. You know, you're you're more quick to be irritable. Poor cell phone service might bother you. Maybe kids get on your nerves. You can't deal with in-laws. Anything like that makes your fuse a bit shorter, more quickly prone to emotional outbursts is one of the symptoms you're going to see. Fatigue, insomnia. Usually people with adrenal fatigue, sometimes they could fall asleep okay, but they most often wake up around 2 or 3 in the morning, and they'll have difficulty falling back to sleep. They sometimes will fall back to sleep, but the sleep is just not that deep, so they wake up feeling tired and lethargic. They are the kings and queens of the snooze button, often. They need something to get them going in the morning, like a cup of coffee or something, Mountain Dew. I had one patient, she would have, you guys ready for this? 13 Mountain Dews a day.
Oh my gosh.
Just to keep her body going up. Excuse me, I forgot, plus her morning coffee. So she'd start off with the morning coffee because she said, look, Dr. Rob, I don't want to do sugar in the morning when I first wake up because I know that's bad for me. So she would have black coffee. I'm like, that's what's bad for you? How about the 13 dews that are going down there? So she'd do 13 Mountain Dew. She really did the dew for sure.
Yeah, she really did.
She did, man, hardcore. And she would do a cup of coffee in the morning and she would take Tylenol PM to try to put herself to bed. But we'll see that, we'll see that with the adrenal case because they're tired, they're tired throughout the day. It's kind of like they're dragging their body around.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
They crash after lunch. And even the crazy thing with the adrenal fatigue case is even though they're not really getting great quality sleep at nighttime, you would think as the evening approaches, they would just be quick to just crash, right? But these guys, not so much. They actually wake up in the evening time. They're more like night owls, right? When the rest of the world is kind of going down, they're like, let's, get on the cell phone, Facebook.
Yeah,
Instagram,
tons of memes about that.
Yeah.
Well, what can we do to help it if we feel like we may have adrenal fatigue? What are the things we can do?
Well, so number one, the most important thing is to identify what's causing it, right? Because the adrenals are reactive glands. All they're doing is just reacting to some type of a stress, usually in the body. Sometimes it is definitely can come from life, right? So, but it's often coming in the body. So getting with a good holistic practitioner, identifying what the cause is, that's paramount. That's number one. But some things that we could do on the side, right, to help those glands, diet is huge. So the adrenal glands, they help to maintain your blood sugar in between meals. So with adrenal fatigue, it's good to eat more often, but smaller amounts. So those guys, they really want like 4 or 5 small meals per day because usually with adrenal fatigue, there's some type of inflammatory component that's occurring in the body. We want anti-inflammatory foods. So we want the cruciferous vegetables. We want kale. We want broccoli. We want cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, bok choy, right? All that good stuff. We want berries. We want blueberries. We want avocado. We want really good healthy fats for the adrenal glands. So avocado, coconut oil, black seed oil is wonderful for the adrenal glands. So we really want more of an anti-inflammatory diet where the person's eating throughout the day versus someone that might, partake in intermittent fasting. We want a diet that's spread throughout the day. We also want really high quality vitamin C, and we don't want a lot of sugar. So we want like low sugar, low processed foods for sure. So those are some things that people could do. There's a bunch of herbs and stuff like that they could take for general support as well.
There's so many directions I want to go with this. You touched on one of the symptoms being easily triggered and being easily, especially upset. And I just wanted to understand how that correlates, or if it correlates to where in our menstrual cycles, especially as women or anybody, we all have hormonal cycles to some degree. So is there a correlation between basically the symptoms you're talking about are when I'm in day 25 to 28 of my cycle, you know what I mean?
Right, got it.
So is there a correlation?
100%. So your adrenal glands make cortisol, and that's your anti-stress kind of hormone, right? Too much of it actually induces stress, but it's the anti-stress hormone. So the interesting thing though is you make cortisol from progesterone, and a third of any menstruating woman's progesterone comes from the adrenal glands, not the ovaries. 2/3 come from the ovaries, 1/3 comes from the adrenals. And progesterone gets converted into cortisol. So when we look at a woman's menstrual cycle, right, it's like when she's actually menstruating, progesterone is low, and then shortly after that it starts to come up, middle of the month it's high, and then as we get closer to menstruation again, progesterone starts to fall off, and then it's low, and then menstruation starts. So when the adrenals are weak, when the adrenals are being pushed, right, they're overproducing cortisol. So they start to steal the progesterone, like little criminals, little thieves. They start to steal the progesterone that they would normally give to you. They start to steal that. And it's used to make cortisol. So your progesterone levels fall even lower. Low progesterone, you're going to be irritable. Your fuse is going to be shorter. You're going to be more quick to emotional bursts. You're going to have problems with sleep. Yeah, you're going to, swell more often. Like all those type of things that you see can 100% be connected and correlated with the adrenal glands and adrenal fatigue.
When I had two babies back to back, and their father was, working like 70 hours a week. So I ended up getting adrenal fatigue, and it led to perimenopause. But the cortisol, I did like a saliva test. And my cortisol, I guess a woman's is supposed to be highest like around afternoon, noon or 2 p.m. Mine was higher than that at bedtime. And so I started taking a cortisol manager.
That's a great product.
Yeah, from Integrative Therapeutics. And I take that, and it's made a world of a difference. But is there anything else that we can do to fix high cortisol?
Yeah. I mean, again, we got to understand like why the cortisol has gone high. So typically when there's a stressor in life, like so adrenal fatigue is induced typically either from the inside out, like there's something going in the body that shouldn't be there, or from the outside in, like there's something that's created in life, a high stress situation that's just overloading the glands, right? And they can't keep up. Often it's a combination of both. So one of the things that people could do to combat high cortisol is, again, you got to look to see if there's anything else going on in the body. I've found probably about 80% of the time there is. So that's like the first thing. Like, let's take this person's case apart. Like in yours, for example, I would just dissect your case and figure out what's going on. There's probably something else that's going on in your body that you're unaware of, or maybe you're aware of, that's not been handled and addressed. And that's probably connected to your adrenal issues and to the elevation in nighttime cortisol. Parasites and bugs and stuff like that, they're actually more active in the evening. So they create more inflammation in the evening, pushes the cortisol up higher at nighttime. So that would be like number one. The other things that you can do, right? So doing the things that switch the clock, like your hypothalamus gland sits in the brain, and that's what controls your circadian rhythm, your wake sleep time, when you're pushing out cortisol, when you're not. So doing those things that reset that clock are great. So using a product like cortisol manager, getting your melatonin levels checked at nighttime, and if they're low, correcting that as needed. Trying to be more active in the morning time. So you're getting light on your face, you're getting bright light, ideally in your eyes, on your skin. Those things can help. Getting exercise in the morning can really help. And making sure as we approach the evening time, our diet is, one, not too heavy, and two, filled with lots of anti-inflammatory foods. So a meal that has, like some people with adrenal fatigue, just really light meals at dinner time filled with anti-inflammatory foods can make the world of difference in helping to reset their sleep patterns, as long as they're doing the other stuff. So those are some things that they can do.
So in anti-inflammatory foods, you listed off some beautiful ones earlier, but I don't know, is there anything you can speak to in that realm? That I think just the idea of foods being inflammatory for some of our listeners would be new information. So maybe just speaking to that.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So there's certain foods. So the human body, some people's bodies genetically work better with different foods. And we know as a general average for us humans, as a group, as a species, there's a few sets of foods that are pro-inflammatory, like they create inflammation in the body. We know this from lots of clinical research, blood tests, all that stuff.
And maybe just why is inflammation in the body bad? I mean, you spoke directly about cancer, being the thing that kind of kickstarted this journey for you, watching that happen in your parents. So like, if I'm just a beginner in any of this and just opening my, third eye into the physical world of how food works in my body and how I can prevent this stuff, why is inflammation bad?
Inflammation is literally connected to almost every single disease that mankind interacts with or encounters today, like everything from cancer to heart disease to stroke to diabetes. Every one of those things, obesity, we find have a direct underlying connection is inflammation. So that's why it's so vital to make sure your diet and your lifestyle is one that helps to drive the anti-inflammatory processes versus the inflammatory processes.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay. So sorry to sidetrack you, but back to the foods and the way that they respond, our bodies respond.
Sure. So there's some foods that are pro-inflammatory, and we know they just increase inflammation. That's what they do. One is all refined sugar. So all refined sugar, you know, if you're new to the game, if you're just opening your third eye to this whole thing, watch out for the sugar. You don't want to get too much in that eye because that stuff is really, you know, like really inflammatory to you. The others that we know are gluten and dairy. So gluten, for the new guys out there, gluten and gliadin are the protein structures that are found in wheat. Many of us are missing the enzyme, or I shouldn't say many of us, some of us are missing the enzyme. Many of us have a set of enzymes that don't work as well, so we can't fully break down and process the protein that we find in some of these gluten grains like wheat, barley.
Does that seem to be a new thing, since people seem to be sensitive to gluten now, but we never really heard of that before? Or
Yeah.
I don't know that it's new. I think what I think is this. I think in part there's been a lot of things that have occurred over the years, like the introduction of GMOs in 1994, like the increase in vaccines that we see, just the increase in general toxins and pollutants that we have in our environment, right? So I think it's like all those factors that kind of damage
changing it.
Yeah, right? Damage some of our basic physiology. And as a result, these foods maybe that we used to eat 200 years ago that didn't cause any problems are now problematic for us. And gluten for sure is one, and another one, sugar, gluten, and dairy are probably
sugar, gluten, and dairy.
Probably the three biggest.
Yeah.
You know?
Does it matter with wheat if it's, say it's like sprouted and organic? Does that make it okay? Or
so that's better, just because overall it's a healthier thing. But when we're looking at wheat, what we're looking at is, does this person have what they need in order to break down gluten, the protein in wheat, and be able to digest it? Because if you don't, it actually gets converted into, want to hear what it gets converted into? It's crazy. It gets converted into morphine derivatives.
Wow.
What?
That makes
So
total
how
sense.
how do we know if we don't have that? Because we get bloated and we get slow digestion, or
that's a gluten intolerance. My girlfriend actually has the extreme, which she actually feels drunk whenever she has gluten because it's ate into your brain.
Right. Spot on, Mercedes.
Wild.
Right. I give you an A+.
And on the milder side, is it just bloating and slow digestion, or
so
what?
This can vary. One of the crazy things with gluten that we see is we run panels that are called immunoglobulin panels, and we'll see these immunoglobulins, they elevate sometimes not immediately after the person eats the food. Sometimes it's 48 to 72 hours later. So you might have a bowl of wheat cereal on Monday, but it's not till Wednesday that you start to feel awful. So it's hard to sometimes draw the connection, which is why it makes sensitivities, especially in gluten's case, so problematic. But usually you'll see on the milder side, like bloating, maybe some tiredness, maybe just some achiness, maybe brain doesn't function as well. Some people will get some skin irritation and things like that on the more mild side.
I'm pretty much gluten-free, but I really love Dave's Killer Bread. So damn good. And it's sprouted and organic, but I know I need to get rid of it.
James, I'm 100% Italian, right? My grandparents.
Oh no. Well, yeah.
Off the boat from Italy. I grew up in the kitchen with my mom making
yes.
pasta. My grandmother and I used to have these tables stretched out. I mean, literally from our living room all the way down the hallway, and we would roll homemade gluten-filled pasta.
Right.
When I found out I had to give up gluten and had to like tell my extended family I couldn't have gluten anymore, it was like I was committing a capital sin. They were like, "Robbie, what are you doing?"
But that's one of the three. It's gluten, dairy, and
sugar.
Sugar are the most. Those are the most inflammatory foods.
They are. I don't know that they're the most, but in like general population, if we had to say for everyone, they're the most common for sure.
Okay.
And that's what I found in my own, journey into figuring out what I can and can't eat in order to be my best self.
Yeah.
Which I don't always follow the rules by, but a big part of that journey for me has been really dissecting what my microbiome looks like, or as much as I can, through tests, through stool tests and that type of thing. And then trying to work to feed the ones that I want to colonize more of, and starve the bugs that I want to, not have such big colonies of, but keeping a variety in my diet. And now that we're having, like Joe Rogan right now is advocating the all meat diet right now, which is, I don't know what his own motives are, but anything that's like, of course, every person has different microbiome, different gut bugs. So they're all going to have a different response to the diet they thrive on. But I'm just wondering if the inflammation that's happening because of the enzymes that do or don't exist in our gut or that are helping us process our food and digest our food. Is that tied together with the bugs that we've got going on in there? And on top of that, and maybe this is like a secondary question, but how does that layer in with hormones? Because I know so much of our hormone production is related to our microbiome and our gut bugs, and especially vitamin D, which is a hormone, right? So go on, any of that.
First off, I got to say, you guys are hip, man. You guys are awesome. That's really good. That's very impressive. That's really, really cool. Yeah. So to answer your question, 100%. There's such a large connection. There's such a large connection between what's happening in our microbiome and what's happening in the rest of our body, right? Mm-hmm. It's like we have more cells there than we have in our whole entire body. There's so much stuff going on in that area. And there's a direct connection between the foods that we're putting in our body and what grows and what doesn't grow. So often, if we're putting in things like sugar, we're growing the bad bugs that we don't want to have grown. We're growing the candida, we're growing the yeast, we're growing the opportunistic bacteria that's sometimes associated with autoimmune disease, right? We're growing those things. Same thing with gluten, same thing with dairy. And the big thing is if you can't, to sum it up, and I think to put it into simplicities, if the digestion can't occur and the food can't be fully broken down the way it's supposed to be for the human body, then when it gets to the small and large intestines, the harmful bacteria, they got a meal. Right. It's like a buffet for them. They're like, oh yeah, Jade's not digesting today. Bring it in. We're going to eat it. Right. So then they eat it, and then they start to grow out of control. And then we start to have these imbalances in our microbiome. We start to get these harmful bacteria that start to form. They make their own set of toxins that create inflammation in our body, add to inflammation, further stress the adrenals. When the adrenals start to get stressed, overproduction in cortisol. When they overproduce cortisol, they can't make enough of the good hormones. So everything starts to go off balance. Everything affects everything else. It's like a huge domino effect is what occurs.
Yeah. And it's really serious. And I think it's such, using a word like microbiome, it's very hip right now, and it's all of that. But at the same time, it's very intimidating if this is, where you're starting your journey. So I would just lend to the listener to just type that in somewhere and start listening to Dr. Rob's videos on digestion and all of the things that pertain to us becoming better from the inside out. And because I'm not going to do a good job of explaining this, and you will probably do a wildly better job, I wanted to bring up part of my story that got me to even be interested in bettering what I was eating and making myself feel okay. It started very much with anxiety, depression, and all these symptoms coming in that seemed psychological. And, partially, of course, I had some old stories and childhood traumas and things I had to break down, but so much was also related to my diet. And I know that because I had been chronically constipated from about 14 to 30 years old, but not knowing, because talking about poop is so taboo, and especially as a female, so it was something that never really got talked about. Now on the show, it gets talked about all the time. But part of my journey, as I was uncovering, okay, well, a lot of this, emotional trauma and stress is wound up in my gut and is affecting the way that my body does digest food. And of course, the food I'm putting into my body and the physical activity I do or don't have on a daily basis is affecting all of me. And something that was crucial to my final healing of my gut was introducing what my naturopath doctor brought, which was the way that the system works from when you put food into your mouth and it goes into your stomach, and where the enzymes begin, breaking it down from your mouth into your stomach, and the amount of acid you need in your stomach in order to do that job, without the diluting of drinking too much water before a meal, without all these other obstacles that we decide to throw in there because so-and-so tells us that that's the right way to do it. And then as it moves down our digestive tract and the enzymes it needs in order to break it down, the bile that needs to be released, and introducing those things, I supplemented them with acid for the stomach portion. The HCl betaine is what I took. Am I saying that right? I'm not sure. I had some enzymes that I would take like later in the meal because of the more alkalinity. I guess they're more alkaline than, obviously the acid is very acidic. Yeah. So, and then bile was the major part for me. I think my bile production was very low. And so that whole thing together, it took a long time for me to get to the perfect recipe for me to finally be able to have regular bowel movements and feel like I was detoxing properly, but I got there. And by the way, if anyone's listening and they do, find a good guidance to get you through how you should implement those into your life and diet, the other side of it is I don't use them anymore. It was like I loaded them, my body got the gist of it. I figured out what to eat and not eat, and then I was able to move off of that. But can you speak to how, like, I know it seems maybe simple because you do this work all the time, but for me, it was really mind opening. It really helped me visualize what my body is trying to do from the moment I put the food into my mouth and what happens through that process.
Okay, so you want me to walk you through essentially the digestion of
Yeah.
food from one end, from one
Yeah.
hole,
Yeah.
from mouth to bum.
Yeah.
Sure. So when you have food, right, and you start to chew it, one of the first things that starts to happen is the food itself starts to break down into smaller particles. And we need them broken down into smaller particles because we've got a bunch of enzymes and stuff that need to get in there, right, to reach them. So in the mouth, we make a whole bunch of different types of enzymes, certain enzymes that help us break down fats, others proteins, others carbohydrates, and they have a certain pH that they operate in. pH is just basically how acidic something is or how not acidic. We call it alkaline. So, but how acidic something is and not acidic. So the enzymes in our mouth, they work in just a slightly acidic environment because your mouth is just a little bit acidic. Like pH of saliva is about 6.5, which is a little bit acidic.
Okay.
So in your mouth, you're starting to digest your food and stuff, and enzymes are being released. Okay, then it goes down the tube, your esophagus, hits your stomach. When it hits your stomach, the next thing that starts happening is you make other enzymes in the stomach, but these are like acidic enzymes. These are enzymes that only work well when there's a lot of acid in the stomach. So the other thing that you start to produce about 30 minutes to 60 minutes after you eat is hydrochloric acid. And this stuff is super acidic, like it'll burn a hole through your floor. It's amazing the way our bodies are created in that it doesn't burn a hole through your stomach. So the acid in combination with the acidic enzymes in the stomach, they break down the food more, and your stomach actually has muscles and it squishes it, right? Like my grandmother would knead dough. She would get in there and just knead this.
Yeah.
Little lady, Angelina, and she would knead this dough, and your stomach does the same thing. It's like kneading your food. It's smushing up your food. It's moving it around. It's turning it. And after a couple hours, it then moves from your stomach into the first part of your small intestines called your duodenum. And your duodenum is very different than your mouth and your stomach. It's really the only part in your whole digestive tube or tract that is alkaline. It's very alkaline in there. Bile is alkaline. And now it's like now what happens is kind of like similar to how if you had like grease all over your counter and you use soap to clean it off, that's what kind of happens in the gut. Bile acts almost like soap. It's an emulsifier and it's a sponifier, and it gets in there and it kind of like breaks down the fat, and it breaks down the fat into little tiny pieces called globules, and it breaks all this down, and you have more alkaline functioning enzymes now that digest. So now the food is pretty digested. We hit it, we chewed it up in our mouth, we hit it with some enzymes, we brought it to the stomach, we hit it with tons of acid, right? Mixed it up, hit it with more acidic enzymes, brought it over to the duodenum, hit it with bile, hit it with more alkaline enzymes. So we're digesting our fats, right? Protein digestion kind of happens more in the stomach. Fat digestion happens a bit more in the duodenum with bile and those more alkaline enzymes. And then we get into the small intestines. And in the small intestines, we have further enzymes getting released because the pancreas is releasing enzymes, and our small intestine, the cells in our small intestine start releasing enzymes, and we start really breaking down food. And now we're absorbing vitamins and absorbing nutrients and all this cool stuff. And then we get down to the very end of the small intestines, and the food, or what's left of the food, is now really kind of waste. And then that moves into the colon. And now we have this kind of waste fibrous material that our beneficial bacteria start to eat and grow off of. And then they start to kind of manage things. There's things that they do. We reabsorb water in our colon, and then we give it back to whatever county we're living in.
That was beautiful. Yeah, I did not expect to ask you that, but I'm so glad I did, because you are the perfect person to give us that information. I think it's critical. It's something we don't talk about often. You don't hear about it often. And it seems like it's something you should learn in school, but you really don't.
So as a comment or an insult? I'm the perfect doctor to talk about.
It's definitely a compliment in my book.
I'm the poop doctor.
Yeah. Hey.
We play one on the show. So
yeah.
Totally.
But no, I love that. And just like the steps you're talking about, that even just chewing, like, okay, focus on chewing for a bit. Make sure you chew it enough, because now you've told us why that's important. The breakdown is starting there. And then once it's in your, once it's gone down your esophagus, relax. Like if you're going to just get into a stressful situation, it's not going to allow the rest and digest phase, which is also other obstacles we get into. So it's just, I don't know, for me, knowing that information helps my brain be able to feel okay. I'm the person that way overworks herself. It glorifies busy in all the wrong ways.
Yeah, yeah.
And, that's stuff I have to work through on my own time, but I need good reason and be able to visualize why I need to allow my body to do this process. It's so important for me to continue living the life I love.
I got to tell you, you guys are awesome. And I love that you're talking about this. And you know your stuff, Mercedes. You really do.
Thank you.
So,
I think the only reason I do is because we were talking about earlier, I went through some dark times.
Right.
Motivated me. I'm
Well,
just hoping people don't have to go that far, to finally find the light.
Right? Stop it before it happens.
Yeah, be preventative.
What's the oldest expression, like an ounce of cure is worth a pound? What is that one?
Oh, I don't know it, but I know what you're,
So prevention is worth a pound of cure.
That's it. Yes. And that's so true.
Yeah, but you're right. If I could just touch on that, just say one thing,
please.
To the listeners, your digestion tract, you have a unique thing that's happening in each step. And if you remove one step, it's not good. So like if you're not chewing it well, it would be like if you had a car on an assembly line, because that's what your gut is like. And you just said, we're not going to put the tires on today. Sucker is not going to drive, right? And it's the same thing with your gut, with your body. We have to make sure that each step is happening from mouth to bone.
Absolutely. Something you mentioned earlier was regarding caffeine intake and the Mountain Dew, doing the do with one of your patients there. And caffeine has been one of those big struggles in my life, whether it's me consuming it and I get all kinds of anxiety from. I haven't had caffeine in like 10 years because I have such a bad experience with it.
Yeah.
Interestingly, I've taken like the 23andMe test and it actually shows your caffeine sensitivity, and mine shows super sensitive. My dad, on the other hand, could have an espresso shot right before he hits the pillow and fall asleep just fine. So it's, different strokes for different folks. But I'm wondering, how do we know how much caffeine is okay, for our bodies and our adrenals to continue to function properly on?
And that's acidic, right? Coffee is acidic.
Generally, yeah. Coffee is generally an acidic compound. There's benefits. There can be benefits to it. There's great polyphenols, antioxidants, and organic forms and stuff. But to answer your question, Mercedes, and I think your question was, how do you know the right amount of caffeine for you to intake? My personal opinion on this is, if you can go without it, that's the best. If you get health benefits from it, right? So if you drink coffee in the morning and you get health benefits and it doesn't affect your sleep in any type of negative way, that's great. So I think the easiest tool someone can use is listen to your body, right? If you're having 3 cups of coffee a day and you're noticing you're not sleeping at night and you're more anxious and you're more jittery, but when you have one cup of coffee a day, okay, you're good. You're good through the whole day. If you're using coffee as a medication where you have to have it to keep yourself going, it's just time to go, okay, this amount of caffeine that I'm using is not good, even if it's 1 or 2 cups, because there's something else going on internally that's preventing my body from operating the way it's like. Our bodies they're supposed to function right. They're like, it's like a car, you wouldn't just be like, oh yeah, it's totally cool that my blinkers don't work. I don't mind. I only got into 4 accidents this week.
But I also wonder, like, some people, it's like they're almost immune to it now, to where they need 6 cold brews, and that they may not be having all of these side effects, but I imagine that their liver is, because it's got to process the caffeine.
100%. Yeah. 13 Mountain Dews is just way too much for anything.
Yeah.
So if I had to say this, like a general rule, if you're healthy, if you feel good, and you did 2 8-ounce cups of coffee per day, and it's good organic coffee, you're good to go. If that's what you like to do. So I think when you start to step outside of the 2 cups, you start to push your adrenals too much, right? If we work with the physiology of the body and we say, when are they awake? The adrenals are the most awake in the morning and the afternoon. So if we support that and we say, well, let's have a cup of coffee in the morning and then let's have one at lunch, we're at least working with the normal circadian rhythm in the body. So, but when we're starting to have it later on in the day, like 2 p.m., 3 p.m., 4 p.m., 6 p.m., 8 p.m., sometimes people at nighttime, right? Now we're starting to distort the normal circadian rhythm per day. And it's just too much, too much.
It's interesting to me too, because of not, using caffeine as a stimulant for so much of my life now. I don't think of I can stay up later and push the limits because I'll just drink more coffee tomorrow or something. It's
Oh,
like,
yeah.
no, I prioritize sleep or nutrition, food over everything else, because that is what my stimulants are. I don't have more to choose from that. Sometimes I feel like other people have like a one up on me, you know what I mean? But at the same time, I think it's benefiting me in the long run, or I'm hoping. That's what I'm telling myself to make me say about it.
It definitely is. There's a doctor, Dr. Goldberg, and I remember he taught nutrition when I was in school. And this guy was definitely, you know what, you meet some of those people in life, and certain ones, they just stick with you. That was Dr. Goldberg. He healed himself from rheumatoid arthritis. The guy was like almost crippled and healed himself from rheumatoid arthritis. And he would just say in his class, he'd be like, look, guys, for you coffee drinkers, coffee makes your adrenals work past what they're ready to work at for that moment in time. And there's only so much your adrenals have. So if you keep pushing them with coffee, they're eventually going to burn out. And me at the time, I'm sitting there with like, a double Dunkin' Donuts sundae in my hand, drinking it, thinking, I think this guy might be on.
Well, yeah. I think another thing is like, if you may not know how coffee's affecting you, you might try switching to matcha or yerba mate and seeing if you still get that pick me up without, like for me, coffee was making me a more impatient mother, and I knew I needed to cut back. I wasn't being as present as I wanted to be because I couldn't be calm. And then when I switched to matcha and yerba mate, it still was my morning like pick me up, but I wasn't having those other side effects. And so it might also just being trial and error, trying something else and seeing if it works better for your body.
Yeah, you're spot on, 100%.
I think it's an interesting topic, and it's one that will probably get a lot of pushback as far as like, we might not mention this is what we're going to talk about in the episode because people might be like, I don't want to push that out of my life because it's an addiction, and addictions, of course, we protect it at all costs. But the fact that it is an addictive substance and that your body starts feeling like it needs this thing in order to be just okay is obviously something that you may look into if you're really needing several cups of coffee or Mountain Dew or whatever. Hopefully it's sugar-free Mountain Dew. I don't know. The sugar just is what, like when you said all those cups of Mountain Dew.
The yellow.
Yeah, the yellow.
Never mind. Yeah.
But
interesting urine.
For sure. But some of the questions or just a couple of questions I might ask myself if I was really worried about any substance I'm putting in my body, but this is caffeine we're talking about here, is, are you rested in the morning when you wake up? Like, did you get your full amount that is what you need? And be honest with yourself. And just, are you able to listen to your body through this substance, or is it affecting the ability to do that? And I think that question itself is really, if we could just be mindful as often as possible, it would help us heal a lot.
I'm still with you. I think so many of us, we're just moving through life so rapidly that we forget to take a moment and just be aware of our body, right? Just connect with our body and go, what is this thing that I walk around in every day telling me? Right? Just take a moment and listen. I think that's huge. I think it's a really, really great point.
Yeah. Okay. So all that in mind, we started that combo off with what adrenal fatigue was and how we can do things to affect it, hopefully for the positive. So what is the difference between adrenal fatigue and thyroid issues? And speak to us about thyroid and how that's all working in our body or not working a lot of the time.
Yeah. So similar, right? Adrenals are usually caused secondary to something. They've been overworked, right? Overstressed. The thyroid is not so much like that. The thyroid, there's similar symptoms, but the thyroid is that it's not functioning usually because it doesn't have something it's needing or something's interfering with its ability to do its job. I did a video once upon a time, and I called it the 39 causes of thyroid problems. And I listed out 39 different causes that I see in my clinic to people that have thyroid problems, because I see this all the time. And people come to me. I had a lady, she was on thyroid medication for 50 years.
Wow.
She wrote us a testimonial. And what we found on her is we found a toxicity. It's called bromine. We found a bromine toxicity on her. And that was essentially interfering with her thyroid's ability to absorb iodine. So she couldn't make thyroid hormone. 50 years, right? She was on thyroid medication. All we did was we did a urine study. We identified the problem, and we said, look, you need to change your diet. You need to take these supplements to flush out the toxin so your thyroid could start working again. The thyroid started working again after about a year, completely off thyroid medication.
Wow. Is that the only way to test your iodine, or to know if you have iodine deficiency, is through urine?
So in my opinion, it's the best way to do that. There's a special test. You guys want me to talk about the test?
Absolutely.
Okay, cool. So
we want people to know how to get to the answers.
All right. Okay. Yeah. So like my wife says I get too nerdy sometimes.
No, we're nerds.
So,
We're with you.
so the test that we do is, it's called a 24-hour urinary iodine study. And you could pick this up online. Any of your listeners can go online and look at it. And a quick disclaimer, if you know you have Hashimoto's disease, which is an autoimmune disease that affects the thyroid, do not do this study. Even if someone recommends it to you, do not do this study, because you'll screw your thyroid up like a million times worse. So, but the way you do the study is you wake up in the morning, you urinate, and then you take a 50 milligram pill of iodine, which is like a billion times more than you would ever need in a day. You know, like usually.
And iodine is from salt or no? Where do you get iodine from?
Yeah, you'll find iodine a lot in sea vegetables like dulse, nori, wajiki, or hajiki. Kelp, eggs are a good source of iodine. You find some iodine in yogurt. So iodine was added to table salt back in the, when was that? I don't remember when that was. It might have been during World War II or something.
It's not anymore, really. I guess table salt maybe, but now everyone's using pink Himalayan or some,
Well, I get told that maybe that my kids have iodine deficiency because they're always asking for salt, but we use the pink Himalayan, but we have eggs every day. So
there's no iodine added.
Yeah. There's probably plenty of iodine. Like if someone has hyperthyroidism, like their thyroid's working too much, you got to pull them off eggs because the eggs have too much iodine. Depending upon the quality of the egg, anywhere between 20 and 40% of the US already have iodine. So you have a couple eggs, you're usually pretty close to it. Rest of your diet usually good. But iodine is needed to manufacture thyroid hormones. So if a person, what was the question? I forgot what the original question was.
Just originally we're talking about what's the difference between adrenal and thyroid. Yes, the test.
The test, that's what it was. So the way it works is a person takes a 50 milligram tablet of iodine, which is it's so much more than you need, probably like, I don't know, maybe 10,000 times more than you would ever need. Okay? Yeah. And what should happen is you take it and then you collect your urine over a 24-hour period, and you should excrete almost all of the iodine because you don't need that much. Right? You should excrete almost 100% of it. Okay. Well, if a person only excretes, like, let's say 50% of it or 30% of it, 10% of it, we know they have a huge iodine deficiency because their body is so deficient in iodine. It's as soon as you put the iodine in your body was like, oh my God, let me grab that iodine. I need that iodine, like a starving kid, that gets food. Or if you ever watch Survivor, when they win a reward, right? And they're at their feast and they're like, oh yeah, they're so happy. It's a similar thing with iodine. So you start to absorb all of it and then you don't excrete as much. And that's one of the best ways I know of to test for iodine deficiency.
Fascinating. I had a homeopathic doctor who put iodine on my skin to see how long it took to absorb. Do you think that that's an accurate way to measure?
Yeah. So it's a good, like what I would call like triaging test. It's good. We've done that in my office as well. You just do a little square of iodine and you see, like it should take about 24 hours a year. And if it takes less than that, depending upon where it is, it indicates some degree of iodine deficiency.
Okay.
And is iodine deficiency, the way people would know if they have it though, like just from if this is a concern, is because they're struggling with thyroid issues? That would be like the main symptom?
Yeah, usually you have symptoms that are connected with hypothyroidism when you're truly iodine deficient. Yeah.
And what are those symptoms?
What are those symptoms? You typically will have, so you can have weight, so it's different for each person, but you can have weight gain all over. You'll have fatigue. You'll have dry skin. You'll have hair that starts to fall out. Yep, which is lovely. I know women love that. So you'll have.
And this is hypothyroidism and Hashimoto's. Is that a related?
Both of them, can have these exact same symptoms because they're both hypothyroid problems. There's just two different causes behind them. Okay. Yeah. So you'll have, what else? Oh, you'll have brain fog. So you'll be trouble for you to like remember things. You'll have cravings typically for carbohydrates. You'll lose sometimes the outer 1/4 of your eyebrow. It'll become thin or lost. Yeah, that's the big stuff. Those are the big things.
I have like the liquid iodine supplement at home. Yeah. I have no idea why. I must have, I don't want to take it because I don't know if I need it, but it's there. I don't know why I have it. Okay.
My general recommendation is don't take iodine unless you know that you need it, because if you push too much iodine in your system, it could actually lead to, in some cases, Hashimoto's. It's autoimmune disease.
Oh, wow.
So,
Wow. So I was also told that a symptom of I guess we can call it PMS, a symptom of being a female in her childbearing years is breast tenderness during parts of your cycle, and that iodine can be one of the things that helps to not have that or remove that, or that an iodine deficiency could be what leads to that. Is there truth to that?
That's true. So your first major storage place of iodine in the body is the thyroid. The second one is the breast tissue. Yeah. What they found, there's actually different clinical research done. You guys can look at this stuff online, but there's clinical research that was done that showed that I'll give you this one study that was done that was actually really neat. They did this study on rats and they injected these rats with this chemical that causes breast cancer 100% of the time. Like it always causes breast cancer. So they have like 3 different groups. They got a control group. They have the group that they're injecting with the stuff that causes breast cancer. And then the other group where they're injecting the stuff that causes breast cancer into these mice, but they're also giving them adequate amounts of iodine to make sure their iodine levels are really good. And 0% of the mice that had the iodine and the stuff that causes breast cancer, 0% of them got breast cancer. So,
Wow.
yeah, that's not to say that iodine is going to stop everyone from getting breast cancer, but we know that there's a connection there. We know that there's definitely.
That's fascinating. My grandma-in-law just had a surgery on her thyroid, I think removing part of it, something she struggled with for a long time. And I don't know what the, more holistic ways are to go about avoiding having that removed. I'm sure having your thyroid is a very important part of your body's ability, like we've been speaking about here, to regulate and to do what it needs to do. So once you have had a surgery like a removal or a partial removal, I'm not sure what the names of the surgeries are myself. Is there anything to do at that point to help, continuing being healthy and alive, for that matter?
Sure, and alive. That's an important one. Yeah, of course. So if someone's had a partial thyroidectomy is the term when they remove the thyroid. So if they've had a partial thyroidectomy, there's a lot that could be done because they still got a side that's working in there.
Okay.
Right? So there's a lot that they can do. And it's different for each person. The big thing a person needs to know is if there's any autoimmune disease present. And for your listeners that think they might have a thyroid problem, the marker that medical doctors for some reason don't always check for, but they need to push their MD to check for this marker is what's called TPO, stands for thyroid peroxidase antibodies. Everybody needs to get that checked. It's like before we give iodine to anyone in our clinic, we check that the majority of the times, because if you have that usually means you have Hashimoto's present and you don't want to take a bunch of iodine. So if you have a person that has had a thyroidectomy and they don't have Hashimoto's, so they've confirmed that, then there's so much stuff they can do. Do you want me to give you the whole list?
Absolutely. Sure. We're good with it. Yeah.
All right. If it's too nerdy, just shut me up. So your brain has your pituitary gland, and your pituitary gland makes thyroid stimulating hormone that tells your thyroid to work right. Your pituitary gland needs a substance called asparagine. It's an amino acid, and it needs that to manufacture TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone.
Okay.
So a person has to make sure that they have some asparagine in their diet if they've had a thyroidectomy. They also need to make sure that they have proper vitamin A. Planetary-wise, vitamin A is one of the largest deficiencies on the planet, believe it or not. But it is.
Wow.
Vitamin A helps a gene in your body work properly that causes you to make a TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone. Right?
And where do we get vitamin A from?
Oh, any types of fruits and vegetables for the most part. Mostly your orange stuff like sweet potatoes, yams, carrots. There's a lot of beta carotene in those. You can get the fatty vitamin A from seafood. So salmon, most like fatty fish. They're going to have some.
Does that come in our fish oils then?
Probably not in your fish oil, because fish oil has usually been purified to contain only EPA.
Omegas. Okay, good.
Yeah, omega-3s. Yeah. So you need that. So you need vitamin A and asparagine for someone that's had a thyroidectomy. And then they have to make sure they have proper iodine. And they also need another amino acid called L-tyrosine, because those two, your body takes iodine and L-tyrosine and it puts those together, and then it makes thyroid hormone. So you need that to make thyroid hormone. And the iodine also keeps your thyroid safe, providing you don't have Hashimoto's. Keeps it like protected potentially from thyroid cancer.
Right.
So so then from there it gets a little more geekier, but from there your thyroid hormone has to go to your liver, because the thyroid hormone that's made is not really activated. It goes to your liver, and your liver uses selenium to help activate your thyroid hormone. You got to also make sure you have selenium. So those are the big things. You need like selenium, L-asparagine, L-tyrosine, and iodine.
So a very anti-inflammatory and well-balanced diet with some variety, it sounds like.
And I know celery is very anti-inflammatory, and I felt like I had all the symptoms of hypothyroidism, and I started doing celery juice every morning on an empty stomach, and all of my symptoms went away.
Medical
So
being, boy, he knows his stuff.
yeah, medical medium. We want to have him on. But I know that celery juice is really good for thyroids as well. So
Yeah, celery juice is good for like just about everything.
I know. Yeah.
I love that beautiful recipe that you just gave us, though. All the nerdiness of it. I like all of it. So I did want to ask, though, how does this affect men, the thyroid? And are there, and we talk about thyroidism in women a lot. It seems
Yeah.
much more common. And Hashimoto's specifically, is that a woman only issue?
No, so you'll find it if you just look clinically, you're going to find it more in female than man. But yeah, men and women too are affected.
Okay. And so in men, the thyroid plays what role?
Same as women. Our thyroid is responsible. One of the big things the thyroid gland does is it activates your mitochondria.
Okay.
And they're the little, your thyroid actually controls the size and number of mitochondria in your body, controlled by your thyroid. There's other influences to that, but the thyroid controls that. So the mitochondria, they basically are the little structures in your cell that converts food right into energy. So fats, proteins, carbs, it converts those into energy. When the connection between the thyroid and mitochondria doesn't happen, then you don't burn the food as well. So your metabolism slows, right? And you get lots of stored or potential energy.
That.
You got it, right? Do you know who Dr. Berg is?
Yeah, I love Dr. Berg. That's part of my bile healing.
Oh, cool. So he's a friend of mine, and I really love him. And he used to always have a joke. He would tell me this. He would say this joke. He'd say, "Look, man, Rob, it's not fat. It's just potential energy."
Yes, it's true.
That's funny.
I like that use of it for sure.
That's funny. So Mercedes.
No, you guys are good. Go.
I didn't know if you had to finish to that last piece with
The male.
amended.
Yeah, as far as the male, no, it's just that your thyroid, that's what it does, right? It activates your mitochondria. It has them convert your food into energy so all of your cells can work. So that means your liver cells, your heart cells, your stomach cells, your muscle cells, your brain, everything is fueled to one degree or another by your mitochondria, and your mitochondria are affected significantly by thyroid hormone production. So there's no discrimination, male or female. Right. You got a thyroid problem, you have some issues with normal bodily function.
But it's seen in women more often. Why?
I don't know the answer to that. Yeah, I wish I did. I don't know. I don't know that we know an answer to that. I don't like science-wise, clinically. I don't know that we know that if it has to do with genetic propensity, if it has to do with lifestyle. I don't know. But that's a really good question. I
wonder what that is related to. Okay,
it has to do with estrogen, because estrogen interferes with thyroid function, right? It shuts down. In female, that has to do with that. In women, levels are generally higher, right?
And usually thyroiditis and all these other issues around thyroid seem to happen later in life when you're going into the menopausal stage or in the menopausal stage. So that's less estrogen.
They can, they can, but not always. And,
right.
And one of the flip sides to that too is cortisol also interferes with thyroid production. So as we get older, like cortisol goes up, right? Hormones like progesterone goes down. So there might be something between all that.
I wonder if I'm just going to be taking these cortisol pills for the rest of my life.
No, Jade, you got something going on. You need to.
I've been taking them for 3 years.
Well, that's good. Continue, because they're definitely not hurting you, But yeah, there's something, right? There's something that's going on. There's different. So you guys are probably hip to all this stuff, but there's different stress reduction techniques that you could do to also lower cortisol in the evening.
Give them to us. I've heard your video on it. I've watched your video on it. I'd love for you to tell our listeners.
Oh, do you want me to tell you?
Yeah.
Okay, sure. Yeah. So there's different things you could do. One of the things that you could do are just simple breathing exercises at nighttime, right? Like before you go to bed. And there's a variety of them. I found on the clinical side, the one that seems to work best is the 4-7-8. Lowering cortisol, which is simply before you go to bed at night, breathe in 4 seconds, hold it for 7 seconds, let it out. Oh, let me back up. So breathe in through your nose slowly, right, for a count of 4, hold it for a count of 7, and then breathe out slowly through your mouth for a count of 8.
It's wonders for anxiety.
Wonders.
Sure, right? So that's definitely a good one. Another thing that you could do, of course, is just really like embarking and taking in the action of appreciation, gratitude, acknowledgement before bedtime. That practice, what was the name of the neuroscience? There's a neuroscientist, and what they found is one of the things that has a huge effect, like monumental effect on the expression of your genes, like which genes are on. Is it the cancer gene that's on? I'm getting cancer. Or is it the, hey, I got energy gene that's on? One of the huge things that it affects the expression of your genes are your thoughts.
Absolutely.
So it's crazy, right? It's this mind-body connection that we have. So thinking of things, especially while you're doing this breathing exercise, things you're grateful of, thinking of all things you're grateful of, the people you're grateful of, the love that you have, for positively viewing yourself in the next day, the greatness that you're going to bring to your day and to other people's day, and how you're going to help and how you're going to be of service to other people. That type of conscious thought pattern at nighttime while you're doing the deep breathing, that'll drop someone's cortisol. That'll help. Yeah, because there's nothing else physiologically going on. That'll help pull down.
Absolutely. It reminds me of a guest we were going to have on earlier today that didn't show up. She calls the nighttime meditation a meditation.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I want to check her out. Let me know.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And it made me think of epigenetics and the way that we can affect our genes while we're here and alive, and even before we have children, and pass them on to some degree beforehand, which I think is like just knowing that you can have that much effect on your well-being and creating a better future if you decide to have children with those genes, but just in yourself, by being the change, you're creating a better future for everybody around you. So that's really beautiful stuff. I think that's really important stuff to know.
Amen, Mercedes.
Yeah.
So Mercedes is really great at tracking her hormones and is really passionate about hormonal health, as you can tell. And I, as I mentioned, have had to overcome perimenopause. So we're both really interested in the topic of hormones. Can you maybe go into the different types of hormonal imbalances with us and maybe their associated symptoms?
So there are lots.
I know.
The big one.
There are lots. One of the big one. A good one, especially for women, estrogen dominance that's a good hormonal imbalance, I think.
When you're not making progesterone, is that what?
That's right. That's exactly right. Yeah, it's usually the estrogen levels are okay, but there's usually not adequate amounts of progesterone being created. That's one of the ways that could happen. I'll explain that a little bit more. One of the other ways is just through the induction into the body of what are called like xenoestrogens and estrogens that come from the environment. Like there's a great website we should tell your listeners about. Do you guys know about Environmental Working Group? Oh, no, you guys don't know his website. Cool. So I'll tell you. So there's your listeners should definitely check this out. Check this out, guys. There's a group they're called the Environmental Working Group. It's ewg.org. And these are a team of chemists. They're a national non-for-profit group. And what they've done is they've analyzed a lot of the stuff that we would use topically on your hair, on your skin, and what you would use for cleaners in your house. And they've given it a safety rating on a scale from 0 to 10. So things that are like, 8, 9, 10, you're going to die. Get that stuff out of your house. Like poison, right? And the stuff that's like 0, 1, 2, you could probably do a shot of it and, you'd be okay.
Wow.
So not that you'd want to do that. It's just a joke. So these things have been evaluated by this group. And what they do is they also say the chemical that's in there, like there's estrogen-like chemicals or chemicals that are endocrine disruptors. They interfere with the function.
Like there's that methyl something is a hormone disruptor that's in almost every hand soap and lotion and laundry detergent. It's in everything.
In everything. And another one are phthalates, which are in like our plastic water bottles and stuff. That's generally in glass.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah.
Mine's much bigger, but I always have a gallon.
She does.
One of these days I'm going to be cool like you, and I'm going to go for it. That's awesome. You rule. Yeah. So that's one of the other ways we can get into this estrogen dominance type of condition. There's just too much estrogens coming in from the environment, in our foods or in our foods and other places. So when we're looking at estrogen dominance, we're looking at not enough progesterone. And when we're looking at not enough progesterone, we're looking at those symptoms like irregularity to the menstrual cycle. Often the menstrual cycle can become shorter than it's supposed to be. When we look at a complete cycle, averaging maybe around 28 days, people that are really in estrogen dominance, they can have a shorter cycle, like 21 days. They can have breakthrough bleeding throughout the month. They could also have irregularities in their cycle where symptoms that they start to experience when they're estrogen dominant are also cyclical, like you explained, Mercedes. Like they'll notice, I had one woman that noticed she had a thickening of the color of the hair, like thickening a mustache, right? There's acne that was worth around the cycle.
I always get a hair right here when I'm ovulating.
Yeah.
There's our video pro Mercedes.
Oh my goodness.
So other things we see with estrogen dominance, we'll see fibrocystic breasts, we'll see depression, we'll see anxiety, cravings for chocolate. Hey, one of the things that's wild, when there's estrogen dominance, sometimes depending upon which ovary the woman's ovulating from,
right,
knee pain on the side.
So every other month it might be, right?
Yeah, low sex drive, fatigue, acne, those type of things we'll typically see in estrogen dominance.
Yeah, and when we see that type of it jumping a month, the symptom jumping a month, is that so that means that one ovary is sputtering, or is one ovary is having a harder time, and so that these hormones are trying to regulate that? Is that what's going on there?
Yeah, you could have
Okay.
a sputtering ovary. It's a sputterer.
A sputterer. Wow. And
Yeah.
so with men, is there specific imbalances that happen? I know that a lot of the men in my life right now that I twist their arms to go to the hormone doctor and get all the labs and all the things, they are seeing a lot of, low testosterone in this time in their life. And I think a lot of that has to do with, like you're talking about, these free, I don't know, we call them free radical estrogens, or what do you call those? But all that exposure that we're getting, even like living by the freeway, you're getting exposure to stuff that's turning your hormones into something you may not want it to be. So what is it, or is it something specific for men that you see commonly being an issue when it comes to hormones?
So I think what we're probably talking about here is almost andropause. It's when testosterone levels are just not quite as active, or as active, quite at the level where we need them to be, or the active form of testosterone is not present in the amount that we need it to be. It's like bound up, right? We'll see that most commonly. What I've found from me just clinically working with guys over the years, the most common reason for that is there's almost always elevation in cortisol.
Okay.
Always cortisol. One of the things cortisol does is it causes a problem with these little enzymes, for the guys that are listening, called your aromatase enzymes. And what they do is they take your testosterone and they convert it to estrogen. So your testes, they pump out all this testosterone, so you could be like, yeah, let's hit the gym. And then you got all this cortisol floating around. So these aromatase enzymes start to go up, and they start to go, now testosterone, come on over here. We're going to make you more estrogen-like. And it literally converts your testosterone into estrogen, or estradiol. So we see that with elevated cortisol. And then what happens, right, is because there's elevations in cortisol, they get belly fat. And then when they get belly fat produces a form of estrogen called estrogen. And then for a guy, that further suppresses testosterone function and actually causes inflammation in the prostate. So
wow.
Yeah, so it becomes like kind of this nasty thing, and then they start turning their testosterone into what's called dihydrotestosterone, and then that causes them to start to lose hair on the top of their head, right? You get male pattern baldness. So for those guys, often we're really looking at them being able to mitigate their daytime stress, correct their diet, anti-inflammatory foods, get on the right exercise program for your body. Those are important. Make sure you're supplementing with the right things, because often these guys, sometimes, not often, but enough of the times, these guys are zinc deficient.
Right, zinc deficient. Interesting.
Yeah. So there's definitely a lot of things to look at with that, but it's certainly not normal. It's certainly not normal. I mean, there's guys that they operate. I mean, God, there's some UFC fighters, these guys are natural. They're not on any steroids. And they're like, in their late 30s, early 40s, and they're still competing. I'm like, what the hell? How are you doing that?
They're rolling around with dudes doing jujitsu all day. And that is T-building. I mean, like, my husband does jujitsu. Yeah. We work for a mixed martial arts organization.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So, and that's how Jade and I know each other, is we worked together in MMA for a while.
Oh, yay. That's
amazing. But I know.
You're saying you don't know this then?
No, he does know this. He
just kidding.
No, I know MMA. Yeah, I know. I mean, I know jujitsu. I took my first jujitsu class in 1994, but it was Japanese jujitsu. It wasn't Brazilian jujitsu.
Oh yeah, that's supposed to be the new too. That's coming back around, I think.
Oh, is it really?
Japanese jujitsu. Yeah, been hearing a lot about it lately. Yeah, it's really cool. So the reason I bring that up, though, on top of what you're saying there about the MMA fighter you knew, is when he goes to jujitsu class, I can kind of count on the fact that when he comes back, he's going to be drained. Like, I mean, he leaves it all on the mat there, and there's none for me when he gets home at all. Yeah. So of course there's a lot of energy output just generally for jujitsu, but because I think you're around all these guys who are, black belts and you're going to have to really, really fight, obviously, in order to, prove yourself as a male in that situation. You're using all of that hormone release. All of your adrenals are probably getting fatigued as well if you're not doing that regularly. And with him, it's only when he's not traveling. So it's not often enough I think, him to have built that type of stamina in his adrenals and in his ability to produce all that. But I think that's a really interesting place, and a good place for maybe men listening to start is getting interactive in something that would trigger your testosterone to boost on its own, including the food types you've talked about, which would be helpful in its own, or sprints maybe, or do you have anything else besides jujitsu and sprints and those type of things that men can do to play that up?
Any type of HIIT training, right? Any type of HIIT training is going to push providing, let me put a disclaimer out here, providing they don't have adrenal fatigue. If your adrenals are
Okay.
fatigued, you got to fix that first before you're ever going to get your testosterone levels up. It's just not going to happen. So providing your adrenals are in decent shape or in good shape, then any type of, high intensity interval training is definitely going to push your testosterone levels up. It's going to push your growth hormone up. It's going to accelerate fat burning, for about the next 48 hours. So anything like that is great. So anything from weightlifting to sprints to activities like jujitsu, boxing, any type of like MMA stuff, anything along those lines, even jumping up and down a flight, flipping a tire outside, chopping wood.
Manly stuff.
Yeah, like my dad, man, that guy, I don't know, he was a little guy. He was 5'7", but he could take, so I used to help him chop wood when I was little, and he was a manly dude though, right? His forearms were like this big before he got sick. And I remember we would go out there and split wood, and he'd put like one of these wood wedges in there, and he just set it, and he would hit it once with a sledgehammer, and boom.
Wow.
I mean, this huge log, break it apart. So I think like when a guy grows up in an environment that it's like a guy's environment, I think it kind of like, it almost begets more testosterone production. Right. And maybe that's why guys evolved the way they did, because their bodies were put in those situations. So they had to have more testosterone to fight, to do combat, to chop wood, whatever it is.
Absolutely. And to combat the cortisol, you gave some great tips, but also I might just add playtime. Like I think we really forget about going outside and throwing a ball around. Well, dancing might be a little more estrogen, a little more feminine.
If you have a tutu on.
We could do some African tribal dancing. I feel like that's very macho.
Oh, yeah.
What about though, like with the progesterone though, before we get too far off that topic, when you're not making enough, what can you do?
Well, again, you got to look at why. And I trace most of the progesterone cases, I trace them back to the adrenal glands, because the adrenals are producing, they're responsible again for a third of all your progesterone production. So when we're looking in cases like estrogen dominance, really we're talking about progesterone deficiency. We got to first look at the adrenal glands. Are they producing what they should be producing? If they're not, all right, let's handle them first. And then if they're handled and there's still some issues there, okay, then there's other factors that need to be looked at regarding what's called your HPO axis, which has to do with your hypothalamus, pituitary, and ovaries, and all that other stuff.
Man, there's so much.
I feel like people are going to be overwhelmed with like,
it's a lot.
Did I just start with the adrenals?
I don't know.
Right?
If I was listening to this podcast, I'd be thrilled by it. So I'm just going to go after that audience who are, listen as much.
So many things could be wrong with me though.
But what could be right,
I think a great starting place for people is if they're not going to work with a provider, if they can, go find yourself a good holistic practitioner.
Absolutely.
A good naturopath, a chiropractor that specializes in functional medicine, an osteopath, or an MD that does functional medicine. Anybody that's kind of natural, more holistic oriented, go find someone, try to work with them. If you're not going to do that, I think a great place to start is just go online, get rid of gluten, dairy, sugar, get yourself a good multivitamin. If you're not sleeping, try some different sleep supplements to help return yourself to a normal sleep cycle. Do the deep breathing, the anti-stress kind of activities at nighttime. Start doing some mild exercise during the day, change your thoughts, and eat an anti-inflammatory diet.
And get in sunshine.
Sunshine. You got to get the sunshine.
So
Vitamin
important.
D.
So I'm going to I know we have another question to move on to, but I wanted to ask on that piece we were talking about men's hormones and all the drama there that can be.
We're dramatic.
We're dramatic. Yeah. We talk a lot about sex therapy on this show. And so I want to know if like edging, if you've heard of that terminology, or abstaining from ejaculation for periods of time and that type of work can help to either increase or decrease the testosterone for a man, or if we don't know.
Here's what I know. So I don't know the answer to that question specifically. I do know a guy engaging in sexual intercourse, not in masturbation, but in actual sexual intercourse with a woman, from the studies I've looked at, increases testosterone.
Okay.
I know that guys looking, not that they should be like on porn all day or anything like that, but I know like a guy looking at images or at their wife in a naked state increases testosterone. And when we look at it logically, it would only make sense, right?
Yeah.
Because that's what's going to help to have better sperm production, which is going to help to facilitate the continuation of the species.
Absolutely.
So
Mhm.
yeah, I hope that
Yeah,
answers.
it does. I mean, to whatever degree we can, because I don't even know that it was a really thought through question. It was just something we've been talking about on the show from time to time, specifically edging and saving sperm or the creation mechanisms and energy that
Yeah.
takes to produce that stuff, but still using sexual energy in your, life in order to have a pleasurable and enjoyable life. But I just didn't know if you might have heard of any correlation between those two things specifically. So thanks
That's a
for
really good.
play.
Well, you got me something to do homework on,
Yeah,
Marcia.
we'll talk about this next time we have you on.
Good.
We'll find some
That'll
answers.
be an edgy
Yeah,
discussion.
Yeah.
exactly. Okay. So you speak often about healing your liver,
Mhm.
and you say healing your liver is healing your life. So what are some of the best ways to heal and detox our liver?
Good question. So I guess one of the first things, is just let's look at food. The liver, as far as food, the liver doesn't like food. And that sounds weird, right? The liver has over 500 different functions. If we just
Wow.
boiled it down to two big ones, we would say there's detoxification on the left, there's digestion on the right.
Okay.
The liver does not do those both very well simultaneously. So when we fast, right, or when we're not fasting, when we're eating, the liver has to focus a lot of its energy on digestion, right? So its ability to detoxify then goes down. And the opposite would be true. If a person said, I'm going to fast, okay, well, while they're fasting, the liver doesn't have any real significant digestive responsibilities. So its ability to detoxify goes down.
Got it.
Yeah. So when we're looking at improving liver health, we're looking at one of the most important things is food. And if providing there's no adrenal fatigue present, a great thing that we could do, and I do it in my daily life, is we can implore intermittent fasting, right? So if someone can, and it's good to start out when you're intermittent fasting. If we just gave the definition to that, it's simply avoiding, it's avoiding food for a period of time that's normally longer than what you would typically see in society.
Okay.
So that could be a good definition for that. And
Which is typically overnight, like 12 hours is what most people are doing.
Minimum 12 hours, right? You'd want a minimum 12-hour fast. So, if your last meal, if you were done eating at 6 p.m., you would not want to start eating until 6 a.m. the next day.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's a good starting point. If you could start to move that and condense your food window down to ideally, I think it's optimal for a person to eat from 12 noon to 6 at night. If they could do that,
That's what I do.
if they could do that, it's so great for your liver. Your liver helps, like we said, to activate thyroid hormone. Your liver turns off cortisol, so it lowers your cortisol production. Your liver activates another hormone called IGF-1, which is like growth hormone. It helps you like grow, become strong and healthy and virile and stuff. So your liver gets rid of excess estrogens or estrogen metabolites that can be linked to cancer and breast cancer. So having that 12 or maybe 14 or 16-hour window, or maybe even a little more, 18-hour window, where you're not eating, gives your liver so much time to just process toxins, balance hormones, restore neurochemistry. So I think that's one of the first and best things that we
And then
do.
also probably being careful what that first thing is that you're taking in after that fast, making sure it's maybe water or celery juice, not something that's going to be hard on the liver, like
Sugar,
or
orange
coffee.
juice. Yeah.
First thing is coffee. Yeah,
Mhm.
exactly. Something that you want your body to absorb on an empty stomach.
Yeah, don't eat a bowl of bonbons, as soon as you break your fast. Yeah, so that's really, really good point, Jade. And yeah, that's 100% true. Cruciferous vegetables, the mineral the liver really needs or traces sulfur, because the liver does something, it uses sulfur in phase 2 liver detoxification. So we get sulfur, great amounts of bioavailable sulfur from our vegetables or cruciferous vegetables. So again, going back to the crucifers, kale, broccoli, cauliflower, radishes, Brussels sprouts, bok choy,
So then do you feel like that all meat diet is too hard on the liver?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just it's people that I know that are super healthy and look amazing. They're on the all meat diet. And so it's confusing.
Here's the thing. And this is something I fully believe. I'll just say it like this. In the almost 23 years now that I've been in practice, I've never had two people on the exact same holistic healthcare program. It's never happened. And there's been a lot of people we've worked with now, close to 25 or over 25,000 people. So it's never happened because everyone's body is
Mhm.
completely unique. So to say there's a single diet that's right for everybody, I don't think we could say that. There's some people that are going to do way better on a ketogenic diet. There's some
Right.
people that are going to do better on a paleo diet. There's some people are going to do better as a vegetarian. You know, it just really depends upon the uniquenesses of their body, what their genetics are able to do and what they can't do, and then their lifestyle, you know. So there's some people that the all meat diet is definitely going to be good for, you know,
For a
but
time. Yeah.
for a time. But overall, when we look at the clinical studies, overall, the vegetables, man, the healing is in the veggies. That's where it's at. You know, it's in the veggies, it's in certain fruits. So yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting to me. And honestly, I'm not shooting on anyone because I agree that there is no right diet for everybody, every body. But it's interesting to me that so much behind the ketogenic diet, you know, of course, that's the fad right now, but, or this all meat diet for that matter, is about, well, when we were, you know, caveman, we were eating all meat. And
Yeah.
it's like, well, actually, before that, we were apes. So, I mean, how far have we gone? I don't know.
Yeah.
Seems like I could go into a real rabbit hole here about where our current evolution has brought us to and the time it's taken to get here. And now the fact that we know about epigenetics and we have the ability with that consciousness to change at a much more rapid rate, you know, for ourselves now and future generations, I think there's going to be a massive paradigm shift as well as an evolutionary physiological shift of our bodies and the way that they are able to digest food and do all the other things that we can manipulate with our genetics in this coming time a lot faster than maybe it ever has in the past. But that's a whole, like I said, a whole rabbit hole. But just the fact that, you know, we try to sell these diets to everybody because someone's making maybe money off of it or it works for them, and so that's what they're, you know, facilitating. But the reality is that if it doesn't feel good for you, then don't do it. For me specifically, I did the keto diet. I've done every diet, you know, and it's given me a lot of background to talk about it on the show. But I did it because I was trying to heal my gut, of course. I did it because I was trying to see if this would help me build muscle mass, lose fat, you know, all the things that you do a diet, most people do diets for. For me, the keto diet made me completely almost stop digestion. I think especially because there's dairy involved in it and much more meat than I had ever been eating in my life, and very little fiber, which for me is an important part of my diet. So it's like I'm saying, and I went to my hormone doctor, by the way, right before I started it. And I was like, just finally had got on track. My hormones were looking good. And then I went literally after I had been in ketosis, essentially for entirely 5 weeks in ketosis. At the end of that, he looked at my panels and he said, whatever you're doing, which he had no idea what, and he's an advocate of a more primal diet, you know, whatever you're doing, stop doing it because your hormone panel is showing that your body did not like it. So I think going back to the hormones is a really important part of how we can know if this is working or not, and listening to our bodies again and making sure we don't have obstacles in front of how, you know, our listening ability with our bodies. So I don't know, all that just to say that's that's just my experience.
Get you a whole soapbox.
Right. Well, I think we just, the point is that we need to listen to what our bodies need instead of being sold it from